So, the world of rock and roll in Britain and around the world, and particularly in Europe, was rocked by the news last weekend, Saturday night, the death of Cavan Grogan, frontman of Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers, a truly legendary British band without ever having a hit record in the British charts. They had a gold record in Finland, but in terms of happening in this country and doing Top of the Pops and all that, like some of the other bands did, they never did any of that, but they were so influential, so important, inspired so many other bands, and had a massive, massive fan following from the time they first formed over 50 years ago, believe it or not, until now. I recorded an interview with Cavan and the band's lead guitarist, Lyndon Needs, in 2006 when I made a documentary on rockabilly for BBC Radio 2, and I thought you'd like to hear some of that tonight by way of tribute to the man. The first question I asked, of course, where did it all begin?
It's Sunday night on the BBC. Geoff Barker, rock and roll.
You've got to go back to the 1960s for that, Geoff, really, because I used to live on this big caravan site. I'm in a place called Pye Corner, and being a rock and roll fan in the 60s was a strange thing to be, because it was the age of the beat boom, you know, and the Beatles and all those sort of bands was coming out and all the Liverpool scene was happening. But to me, I always felt that rock and roll was being crushed before it was over, you know. And I just wanted to find out more about rock and roll and what I'd missed out on rock and roll as well, like, you know, because I knew there was thousands of artists around that we never heard of. So what I started doing was going around junk shops, collecting various records, and you discovered artists that you never even heard of. You just took a chance on the title and stuff like that. And I really wanted to perform this music myself, because you couldn't see any acts doing it, because all the bands that was around was all performing like the stuff from the charts, you know, what Beatles stuff, etc., you know. And I just wanted to perform this stuff, you know, like that I loved. So I started a little band up there called Count Dracula and the Vampires. And I used to wear a cloak, you know, and all that malarkey. And I remember Screaming Jay record come out when I was about 14 in 1963 or something like that. The Whammy, and I just loved it, you know. And that really influenced me a lot, like. And we used to play in this old hall that was like a church on a Sunday. And the rockabilly tag, really, because Lyndon was in my band, and I was more into sort of the black rock and roll, you know, like Little Richard and stuff. But Lyndon, being the guitar player, he was talking to me about like how much he liked Carl Perkins and people like that. And of course, Dan Coffey then, who we met in Newport, was bringing back obscure rockabilly records from America, stuff that was never heard of over here, artists that was never heard of over here, etc. And we just started to pick up on some of this stuff because we just thought it was amazing, you know. And so we became like one of the first bands in England to ever play any kind of rockabilly stuff. So when we first went to London, a lot of the London kids had never heard some of these rockabilly records before. Plus we was writing our own material, and they didn't know whether we'd wrote it or whether it was something obscure we'd come across or whatever, you know. It just suited us, you know, to do that. They were great times. That's how it happened, really, like.
I wanna be a rockabilly star. I wanna jump I put my foot right down the gas, hear the good scream when I shoot past. I wanna be a rockabilly star. Well, I know I can't play piano like Jerry, and I can't wait like I ever suppress Lee. I wanna be a rockabilly star. I wanna jump I put my foot right down the gas, hear the good scream when I shoot past. I wanna be a rockabilly star. Go get it! Well, I'm getting tired now driving the truck. All I want is a little love. I got my guitar, picks and all. I'm gonna have one heck of a ball. A rockabilly star. I put my foot right down the gas, hear the good scream when I shoot back. I wanna be a rockabilly star. I wanna be a rockabilly star.
Well, I don't think he ever got his Cadillac, but he certainly became a rockabilly star. Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers, Rockabilly Star, written by Cavan, from their first EP, which was released in 1973. This is Geoff Barker, Sunday night on the BBC, and a special tribute to Cavan, who sadly passed away last Saturday. In 1966, he was just 17. He left the caravan site he mentioned and moved to a place called Clanmartin in Newport and started going to a club there where they offered free beer to anyone who wanted to get up and sing a song. So he did, and he met up with a pianist called Brian, and they started having a little duo together and doing lots and lots of songs and started getting loads and loads of beer tickets. These impromptu gigs at the club started going really well, so Cavan thought he'd expand things and bring in a mate of his who played great guitar, who would later become his lead guitarist in the Rhythm Rockers and his co-writer. His name, Lyndon Needs.
I told Lyndon about this. I said, why don't you fetch your guitar along on one night? I said, and jump up with us. I said, you get free beer tickets, you know. So he brought his guitar along and just used to jam in with us. And so people started seeing us there from other areas, because coaches used to call this club from all over the valleys and everywhere, you know. And they used to say to us, well, you know, can't you come up our club and do a gig up there and this and that? So we thought, well, we're going to have a name. So we called ourselves the Sun Dogs, because there was Alan Freed who called himself Moondog, a DJ, and by that time we was right into Sun Records that we was buying, so we called ourselves the Sun Dog. And we used to do several gigs here and there up and down the valleys, but mainly we played just on the weekends in this club. And then as time went by, we added Don Kinsella with a bass, and Terry started coming with a rhythm guitar. We started venturing further afield, playing up and down the country. And the reason we changed the name from the Sun Dogs was because suddenly we heard about another band from Cardiff called the Sunsets, which was Shakin' Stevens' band. And they seemed to be doing well on the college circuit and the rock circuit, and we thought, we sound too much the same. It almost sounds like we've copied their name, so we thought we'll have to come up with something else. So we took the name, the Rhythm Rockers, from a Sun single by Hard Rock Gunter. I just used the Crazy Cavan tag, because that's what they used to call me anyway, and just added that to it, and off we went then with that name, like.
Geoff Barker, Rock and Roll Sunday Night on the BBC, paying tribute to Cavan Grogan, frontman and main songwriter in the band, which made them quite unique in those days. British rock and roll bands, in the main, did not write their own songs. They covered the American original classics or some of the later, rarer stuff that was coming out during the rockabilly years. That track, appropriately enough, called Let's Go Crazy, from an album called It's Wild, It's Weird, It's Crazy, one of the numerous albums they put out, came out on their own Crazy Rhythm record label from 1996. But back to the very early 70s, and by this time the lineup of Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers became established, and the one which we all knew and loved. Cavan on lead vocals, of course, Lyndon Needs on lead guitar, Terry Wally, Lyndon's cousin, on rhythm, Don Kinsella on bass, and Mike Coffey, Dan's younger brother, was playing drums. And it was the time they really felt about moving way further afield, and that meant heading up to the big city.
The first time we went to London, we just used to play this club in Landmartin and various little places up and down the valleys and that. And I opened a Melody Maker, which wasn't a paper I bought very often, just now and then, you know. And there was an advert in there, and it said, authentic rock and roll bands wanted for gigs in London. And I phoned it, you know, from the club. Didn't have a telephone at the house at that time. I remember phoning it from the club. And this guy, Harry Holland, come on there, who was running a gig at the Fishmonger's Arms in Wood Green. And on the phone, he said to me, he said, well, look, Mike, you know, are you authentic? Would you call yourself authentic? And I said, you ain't seen nothing more authentic than us, mate. I can guarantee you that. And he was saying, what, do you do Gerald Lee and Elvis Presley and Richard? I said, oh, yeah, we do that and more, you know. He says, you don't worry about that. You haven't seen nothing more authentic than us, you know. And so he said, well, look, if you come up to London, we'll pay your expenses and cover your beer, you know. So we thought, and he said, it's like an audition. He said, if you go down well, he said, we'll book you back for £45 a gig, which we thought was pretty good money in those days, because around here we was playing for about £20 a night then, you know. And so we went up in an old van and we did the audition in the Fish. And there was a band playing there that night. And we took one look at the band and we thought, these guys are mods dressed up, you know. Even their style of playing was very 60s influence, you know. And this and that. Like, although they wasn't a bad rock and roll band saying that, you know, they was doing like Chuck Berry covers and Little Richard stuff and that, you know. So we got up in the break and we went down a real storm, you know. So when we come off the stage, then I approached Harry Holland at the end of the night and I said to him, well, you know, we went down well, Harry, how about these gigs, you know? And he said, oh, well, the thing is, see, man, you know, this wasn't your audience tonight. These people would have been here anyway. I can't guarantee. And he said, so I can remember really cussing him out, you know, and we stormed out the place and didn't come back. And I found out later that he was one of London's top boxing promoters. Yeah. So anyway, he didn't slug me out. So we went back home and we didn't hear nothing then for a few months. And then suddenly he got hold of us again and said, if you're still interested in those gigs, they're on. And he used to book us then regular at the Fishmonger's Arms and the other place called the Greenford Hotel in Southall. How we picked up all the rest of the gigs then is the main one for us was when they did a big gig at the Alexandra Palace. That gig for us was a great one to get us gigs, because what happened there is all the little small clubs from up and down the country, little rock and roll clubs from Birmingham, Manchester, etc., all over the place, they all came there, didn't they? Because this was a big gig. And there were so many people seeing us there that said, oh, come up to Manchester, come up to Birmingham, come up to Sunderland, you know, that suddenly we were finding all these little rock and roll clubs all over the place and we were getting booked in them through the strength of that gig. And so we just started touring England all the time.
And I think it's worth just mentioning a bit more detail about that festival that Cavan mentioned, the one at Alexandra Palace. It was March 1973 and it was billed as the first British rock and roll festival, coming just a year after the big American one earlier at Wembley Stadium, of course. And it was the one that really got them off and round the country, as you heard him say. On the bill, Screaming Lord Sutch, Hines, The Wild Angels, Shakin' Stevens and the Sunsets, Yakety Yak, The House Shakers with Graham Fenton, who later became frontman of Matchbox, Emperor Roscoe and The Wild Wax Show, and Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers. All for £1.25 in advance, $1.50 on the door. The great thing about Cavan was anyone who ever saw them, they did exactly what they said on the tin. The record label said Crazy Rhythm, and that's what you got if you saw them. Their gigs were amazing. I remember so many of them in the 70s, DJing and comparing and working with them many, many times. And there was always a stage invasion at the end. There had to be. And the fans absolutely loved them. not just for the music, but also the way they looked, because they were an unashamed teddy boy band. Their fans were teddy boys and teddy girls, and so were they. They didn't sort of put draped jackets and all that stuff on as like some of the pop bands did a little bit later on as some kind of fashion accessory statement. They were Teds, their fans were Teds, and when they went out on stage, they were Teds. Here's Cavan.
I don't think there would have been a band that wore draped jackets before us, to be honest with you. You know, I don't think anybody would have wore that Teddy Boy style in the band before. I know like Shuaddy Waddy come much later, but that was when we dropped it, you know. We didn't want anybody to think that we was anything to do with that.
It's Sunday night on the BBC. Geoff Barker, rock and roll.
And a tribute to Cavan Grogan.
Standing on a corner, I swing with my chain. Along came a copper and he took my name. He put his dirty molars on my long tree road. So I whipped down my razor and I changed his mind. A teddy boy, a boogie, a teddy boy, a boogie, a teddy boy, a boogie, boogie. Well, I'm a teddy boy, 'cause it's a lot I choose. I wear a draped jacket and a blue suede shoes. I smoke a big cigar and I dig the local hop. A Saturday night to see my baby dance to the pop. Ooh, teddy boy, a boogie, a teddy boy, a boogie, a teddy boy, a boogie, get out! And I changed his mind. A teddy boy, a boogie, a teddy boy, a boogie, a teddy boy, a boogie.
Crazy Cavan and Teddy Boy Boogie from 1975, one of their many anthems, and they had loads, all written themselves.
I was always interested in the writing side of it. As much as I loved doing the great songs like Blue Suede Shoes, etc., and all the songs, like I always wanted to write my own songs, and especially for the Teddy Boy scene, because I used to think, well, the Teddy Boy culture is something that I loved. And I thought there isn't any songs about the Teddy Boys and Teddy Girls, there just isn't any. And I really wanted to write songs about the Teddy Boys. And like when I wrote Wally's Cat in Town, it's a true story, you know. I went to John Collier's in Newport and told him to make me a draped jacket. And when I was telling him I wanted it just a couple of inches above the knee, he was saying, oh no, too long, sir, have it shorter, sir. You know, like I remember looking and saying, who's paying for this, you know? I'm drawing it out, this is how I want it. So as I walked out the shop, I was really mad at the tailor for the way he was being with me. And straight away in my head came a verse like, hey, Mr. Taylor, don't get cute. I want me a Teddy Boy suit. And I wrote it on a fag packet on the way home.
Hey, Mr. Taylor, don't get cute. I want me a Teddy Boy suit. Powder blue jacket with a velvet cup. You better work faster or I might get rough. 'Cause I'm the wildest kid in town. He the wildest kid in town. Ain't nobody gonna put me down. Well, I'm rocking this daddy around. Well, I got a girl that's stood in the tees. Can't take a rockin' in my old blue jeans. Get this Taylor, now get this right. I want that suit for a Saturday night. 'Cause I'm the wildest kid in town. Yeah, the wildest kid in town. Ain't nobody gonna put me down. Well, I'm rocking this daddy around. Let the jacket hang. The guy look cool when I'm with the gang. Walk down the street, people step aside. 6 feet tall and 5 feet wide. 'Cause I'm the wildest kid in town. He the wildest kid in town. Ain't nobody gonna put me down. Well, I'm rocking this daddy around. little teddy boy suit. Find a blue jacket with a velvet cuff. You better work faster or might get bucked. 'Cause I'm the wildest kid in town. He the wildest kid in town. Ain't nobody gonna put me down. Well, I'm the rockin' is steady you bound. Well, the wildest kid in town. He the wildest kid in town.
There's one song by Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers which for me personally sums up the band and forever will. It's that one, Wildest Cat in Town, from 1974. Different version to one I played last week. I played the 1976 version they recorded for Stu and I on It's Rock and Roll. And a couple more tracks from that session coming up on this tribute tonight. Geoff Barker, Rock and Roll, Sunday night at the BBC, paying tribute to Cavan Grogan, frontman of the band, who so sadly passed away last Saturday. And love that great story of Oscar the Tailor. Hey, Mr. Taylor, don't get cute. Absolutely wonderful. And that track would definitely be one of my Desert Island discs. But there was a reason why they had to write their songs. And if you look at their albums, the dozens of albums they recorded, vinyl and CD, singles, EPs, the whole lot, just a handful, and an absolute mere handful, were covers of other people's songs.
When we was doing the covers, we were obviously hearing these before the other bands were, but that's not going to last, you know, because what started happening to then, as these records started to come into the country, and first of all, when we'd be in London, we'd be doing the covers before the people had heard the covers. You know, we'd be doing like Charlie Feathers before people had heard the Charlie Feathers records and stuff like that. But as time was going on, it wasn't just Danny Coffey that was bringing these records. You know, other people were bringing them all over the country. And so you couldn't keep up with that anymore, you know. Other bands was going to cover some of those before you, or the kids was going to get the records before you did them. So it became even more interesting to do your own stuff, you know. So the first album we cut and the first EP, we just totally ignored everything except our own stuff. We was only going to do our own stuff.
But Crazy Cavan weren't only doing songs about teddy boys.
Please wait her in a ponytail. When I wish you rock, I wish you make it sail. Well, my little teddy girl, my little teddy girl. Well, she can really rock and really blow my top over my little teddy girl. Tight dresses and a crazy head. Well, I love to kiss her sweet, sweet lips. Well, my little teddy girl, my little teddy girl. Well, she can really rock and really blow my top over my little teddy girl. Yeah! She liked the music, good light. She liked to go out with the ride. Put a little nickel in the drum machine. Rock it in the morning with my teen swing. Rock and roll in a soda pop. Well, the Becky don't know when to stop. Well, my little teddy girl, my little teddy girl. Well, she can really rock and really do my top over my little teddy girl. Whoa! Well, she liked the music, good light. She liked to go out with the ride. Put a little nickel in the drum machine. Rock and roll in the teenage queen. Rock and roll in a soda pop. Well, the Becky don't know when to stop. Well, my little teddy girl, my little teddy girl. Well, she can really rock and really blow the top over my little teddy girl. Well, my little teddy girl.
And that's how to appeal to your fan base. Write songs about them. Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers and My Little Teddy Girl, which was on their wonderful, huge selling EP, purely going around the gigs. I remember buying mine from them at a gig in 1973, 74, and that came out at that time. Geoff Barker, Rock and Roll, Sunday night at the BBC, paying tribute to Cavan the man and Cavan the band. I've always said this, the most influential British rock and roll band of all time, despite never having got anywhere near the British charts or Top of the Pops or anything else. Their influence was just absolutely massive, as you probably are gathering. And there's no doubt that the huge and influential part they played in creating the British rockabilly scene opened the doors for the original American rockabilly artists who hadn't recorded or been forgotten about for 20 odd years, particularly in their home country, to allow them to come to Britain for the first time, something that really pleased Cavan himself.
Well, I was knocked out over it because, you know, after having these Sun records for years with names on like Warren Smith and Billy Riley and things like that, you know. You didn't think you'd ever see those artists, you know. You didn't even know if they were still alive. And when those artists first started coming here, I was really knocked out the night that we played the Sun Sound show with Warren Smith, you know, because Warren Smith was one of my favourite Sun artists. And I couldn't believe it that he was over and playing a gig, and Charlie Feathers as well. And I was just knocked out about the whole thing, that those guys was finally coming here. And I felt really proud that we played a part in building the scene up that they could come in here. So it was a nice feeling, you know. The only one that I can remember the band actually backing up was on a TV show when they backed Carl Perkins up. And they had Carl Perkins and us there as guests, like, you know. We were doing our own set, and then the band backed Carl Perkins up for a couple of songs on there, you know. Was it the Janice Street Porter show?
Oh, it was a great thrill for me, that was, backing up my hero. I mean, I just couldn't believe it.
Well, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Let's go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoe. Yeah, do anything but lay off on my blue suede shoe. Knock me down, step in my face, slander my name all over the place. Do anything that you wanna do, till I lay off of them shoes, and don't you step on my blue suede shoe. Do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe. Now let's rock, cat, go now. Knock me down, step in my face, slander my name all over the place. Do anything that you wanna do. Baby, lay off of them shoes, and don't you step on my blue suede shoe. Get it, cat. Do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe. Oh, blue suede shoe. Blue suede shoe. Blue suede shoe, baby. Blue suede shoe. Do anything but lay off of my blue suede shoe.
It's Sunday night on the BBC. Geoff Barker, rock and roll.
The year earlier, in September 1976, It's Rock and Roll went to air for the first time on BBC Radio 1 with Stu Coleman and myself, which was the culmination of the Rock and Roll Radio campaign, the Rock and Roll March. And Stu and I had so much to be indebted to for all the bands that helped us out with spreading the word, taking flyers and petition forms and all the rest of it around the country, one of whom clearly was Crazy Cavan and the guys. They took it all over the place. And we were so indebted to them and the other bands as well that when we got on the air and we had an opportunity to have a live session every week, they were the first band we asked to come into the BBC studio at Maida Vale by way of a little thank you. I played you the Maida Vale version of Wildest Cat in Town last week. Here's a couple of the others they did for us at that session. In a moment, Teddy Boy Rock and Roll. But first up, a very rare cover, Smiley Lewis song called Real Gone Lover, with myself and Stu Coleman helping out on backing vocals.
Come on, my baby.
a dirty in a police tie, and she's cool wild when I pass by. Hey the boardwalk, we go to the club with the kids on me. They love me gone to a crazy speed. As soon as the country walks through the door, we're rocking and popping on a harbor floor. Hey the boardwalk, said a great on the squares trying to put me down. He ain't gonna stop me rocking the town. Hey the boardwalk, yeah. Way buried on my collar, I'm buried on my coat. Sometimes I think it's just in the dirt. I get my next suit. Shop of the town, a bright red and yellow way upside down. To the boardwalk, hey the boardwalk. To the boardwalk, hey the boardwalk, hey the boardwalk, hey the boardwalk. To the boardwalk, hey 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 the boardwalk.
Sunday night on the BBC with Geoff Barker and a tribute to Cavan Grogan, frontman of Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers, who passed away last Saturday. 2 tracks they recorded when they came in to It's Rock and Roll in late 1976, produced by our producer Dave Price, who did all the sessions for that show, and there is so much stuff. The cream of British rock and roll, rockabilly and R&B and Americans and all the rest of it, still in the BBC archives. There were a couple of albums issued when the show was still on air, which are long since deleted and were bootlegged, but there's so much in the archives. Somebody should really license them off the Beeb, do it properly. I'll do the sleeve notes and you can put them all out as a wonderful collection of that time. Anyway, I digress. Cavan doing Lyndon's song called Teddy Boy Rock and Roll, another one of their anthems with their fans. Before that, the Smiley Lewis song Real Gone Lover. Cavan were the first British rockabilly band of that era to sign a major record deal. They signed to Charlie Records in 1976. Remember the excitement when their first LP, Rockability, came out. Everybody bought it. From their second album, called Our Own Way of Rocking, there was a track on there which almost gave them their first hit single. We played on It's Rock and Roll, and other people did on the station, and Roger Scott played it to death on Capital Radio, and we all thought it was a hit, and it should have been, really. It was called My Little Sister's Got a Motorbike.
Got a motorbike, see you coming down your way. My little sister got a motorbike, it's a BBSA. She don't wanna do the things that a lady's supposed to do. My little sister got a motorbike, she's a rocker through and through. Rock on! We're sitting in the cafe, boots across the floor, talking about the big machines parked outside the door. My little sister got a motorbike, so you're coming down your way. My little sister got a motorbike, it's a BBSA. She don't wanna do the things that a lady's supposed to do. My little sister got a motorbike, she's a rocker through, right here. Well, she won't wear no ladies' dress, no fancy free bows. Leather jeans and jacket too, that's my sister's love. My little sister got a motorbike, so you're coming down your way. My little sister got a motorbike, it's a BBSA. She don't wanna do the things that a lady's supposed to do. My little sister got a motorbike, she's a rocker through and through.
They'll always get you in the end, you know. Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers and the hit that got away, My Little Sister's Got a Motorbike. They never stopped working, they've never stopped recording, and in 2008 they asked me to write the sleeve notes for an album called Let's Blank Rock. And I'd just like to read you the very last paragraph in the sleeve notes, not out of any kind of ego on my part, it's just that I don't think I can improve on it in terms of how I felt about the band and what they've done in some 50 odd years. This is what I wrote. At a time when pop lightweights are being elevated into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, karaoke wannabes are being told by TV talent judges that they are superstars, and so much musical blandness abounds, it's great to have a band that can still kick all their backsides. I sometimes think it would have been nice had they become pop stars in those rockabilly 70s and had mainstream recognition with chart hits, awards, TV chat shows and the like. Very nice for them financially, of course, but in a way, I'm glad it didn't happen, and I have a sneaking suspicion that they may just think that too. But having said that, surely some kind of former music business award should now come their way after all these years. Although that was written in 2008, it still holds good and held good right up until last Saturday, when the man who fronted that band sadly died. And the final word comes from him, Cavan Grogan.
I think it's just down to that it's still damn exciting music. The reason we still got a young following is because we're not like a cabaret band, you know. I don't know what's going to happen every night, no more than anybody else, you know. Anything could happen, like, you know. It's still good fun, and we're certainly still having good fun playing it, and we like to think that the audience is still having good fun coming to the gigs. As long as we got our health and we're able to do it, I can't see us ever stopping, really. You just got to keep rocking, that's all you can do.
Away from home, playing in the band, doing all the smoking bars up and down the lane, playing all your favorite tunes, man, it sure is rain. If you want some fun in life, get yourself a band. Well, get yourself a band, boy, play a happy tune. Make the guys all jump around, watch your tails all swing. Get yourself a band, boy, you can do it fine. Guitar picking, son of a gun, at the same time. She can leave a thing nice, if people cheer. Your record's doing well this week, time is getting near. You can stay late till 12, you can go get cane. If you want some fun in life, get yourself a band. Get yourself a band, boy, play a happy tune. Make the guys all jump around, watch your days and screw. Get yourself a band, boy, you can do it fine. You guitar picking, son of a gun, at the same time. Woo! No more getting up at 8 and digging in the ground. All you gotta think about is your guitar sound. Some people work in gym stores, some on hot dog stands. If you want some fun in life, get yourself a band. Well, get yourself a band, boy, play a happy tune. Make the guys all jump around, watch your days all swoon. Get yourself a band, boy, you can do it fine. You guitar picking, son of a gun, at the same time. Woo!
Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers and Get Yourself a Band from their first album for Charlie Records, which was called Rockability, and a very appropriate title, if ever there was one. If your old Cavan vinyl is worn out, or you've only just discovered them in recent years, or you've been inspired listening tonight thinking, I'd love to get all their stuff, there's a 5 CD box set which came out on Charlie Records, I think a couple of years back, still in catalogue, and it's got their first 5 albums on it. In fact, their first 4 albums for them, and an album they recorded previously for a Dutch label called Rock House Records, and it's highly recommended. And as I said, virtually all the songs are their own. Just before we go, I'd like to read something else to you. I've got one request to play in just a moment, but before that, I had a note from Cavan's family. They asked me to read this out. Cavan's family would like to thank the many thousands of people who've contacted them, both publicly and privately, via email, social media, phone and in person at this very sad time. The Rhythm Rockers and Louise and Dick would also like to thank you for your kind messages. It has been a great comfort to all of us. And I'd like to add my personal condolences to Cav's family. It was a big shock to me, as I know it was to everybody, but I knew the guy and the band from, I guess, 1972, 73. Got some great memories which will live with me forever of working with those guys, having such fun. Coming back from a festival in Norwich in the fog, and we got lost. Well, I did anyway, and ended up in a garage where I had to sleep in the van overnight. And I woke up in the morning, the fog had cleared, and next to me was another van, and Cavan were in that. They'd done exactly the same thing. Things like that are going to stick in my mind forever. He was such a great guy, and they were such a great band. And it's a really, really massive loss to the world of rock and roll and rockabilly.